My name is Dan, and I have lived in this neighborhood for nearly 10 years. When I first moved here, the street was quiet, peaceful, and full of friendly faces. Children played outside until sunset. Neighbors greeted each other during morning walks, and weekends were calm and slow. It felt like the perfect place to build a life. But everything changed when our homeowners association, HOA, decided to introduce a new improvement project. At first, they announced that they wanted to improve the community's water supply by constructing a water treatment plant. The idea didn't sound harmful, not until they revealed the location. One morning, I stepped outside and saw construction markers less than 20 feet from my backyard fence. I couldn't believe it. They were building the plant right next to my house. I immediately went to the HOA office to question it. I said, "This is a residential area. You can't place an industrial water treatment system right beside someone's home." The HOA representative didn't even look bothered. He leaned back in his chair and replied with a smug tone, "Mr. Dan, this is for the benefit of the neighborhood. You should be grateful." That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know. They had made their decision, and they didn't care how it affected us. Most neighbors didn't speak up, either because they didn't want conflict, or they were simply intimidated by HOA's authority. Construction began quickly. Trucks, cranes, and heavy machinery ran day and night. Noise echoed through the neighborhood continuously. Dust coated our windows, outdoor furniture, and even the plants in my garden. And then came the smell, an awful, chemically, sewage-like smell that never quite faded. After months of disturbance, the plant was finally completed, along with a massive water storage tank. The tank was so tall that when I looked out of my bedroom window, it blocked half the sky. I voiced my concerns repeatedly, telling them the tank was too large and too close to my home. If something went wrong, it could be catastrophic. But the HOA's response never changed. Our engineers know what they're doing. They dismissed every warning. And then came the day I will never forget, the day the tank exploded. The morning the tank exploded started like any other. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee, trying to ignore the faint chemical odor that had become a daily annoyance. The sun had just risen, and the neighborhood was quiet. For a moment, it felt almost normal again. But that peace didn't last long. At exactly 7:42 a.m., I heard a low rumble, like distant thunder. The ground beneath my feet vibrated slightly. I stood up, confused, wondering if maybe a truck had passed by. But within seconds, the sound intensified into a loud, violent boom that shook my entire house. The windows rattled so hard I thought they would shatter. I ran outside, only to see water shooting into the air higher than the power lines. The massive storage tank had ruptured, and a burst of water tore through the metal like it was made of paper. The pressure was unbelievable. The force of the explosion sent debris flying in every direction, metal chunks, pipes, and parts of the plant structure landed all over the street. Within moments, a tsunami of water came crashing down the slope directly toward the HOA administration building, which, ironically, was located at the bottom of the hill. The very people who insisted the tank was safe were now the ones dealing with the disaster firsthand. I watched in shock as the entire HOA office was flooded in seconds. Cars floated, windows broke, and people inside scrambled to get out. Some had to climb onto desks and counters just to avoid being swept under. One of the same representatives who once told me to be grateful was now pounding on the glass window, panicking as water surged around him. My neighbors came out of their homes, shouting, pointing, and screaming. Some were filming. Others were trying to help. A few rushed to the HOA office to pull people to safety. It was chaos, pure chaos. And the worst part? The water wasn't clean. This was water that had been through processing tanks, storage chambers, and chemical filtration systems. It carried dirt, sludge, bacteria, and who knows what else. The smell hit us before the flood moved toward the residential side of the street. I yelled to everyone nearby, "Get inside. Get to higher ground." We all backed away, trying to protect our homes. But the dirty water spilled into yards, garages, and basements. My back porch was covered in muddy sludge within minutes. The HOA had ignored every warning, and now the entire neighborhood was paying for it. The aftermath of the explosion was worse than I could have imagined. The floodwater didn't just cover the streets, it seeped into homes, garages, and foundations. The plant's chemical treatments had mixed with the water, creating a murky, foul-smelling sludge that clung to everything it touched. Walls were stained, carpets ruined, and yards looked like swamp pits. The neighborhood, which once looked peaceful and well-kept, now resembled a disaster zone. Emergency crews arrived within minutes, fire trucks, ambulances, and city workers. But even they were stunned by what they saw. One firefighter took one look at the destroyed tank and said quietly to another, "This shouldn't have been built here." Yeah, tell me something I hadn't been saying for months. HOA officials, the same ones who had ignored every complaint, were now scrambling to look responsible. They stood around pretending to direct traffic and coordinate cleanup. But everyone could see the panic in their eyes. Their office building was soaked, equipment destroyed, and records ruined. It was ironic. They had flooded themselves. But the worst part was when they tried to blame the incident on unexpected structural stress, as if it was no one's fault. No mention of community warnings. No acknowledgement of negligence. Just a carefully worded excuse to avoid responsibility. That was when the neighborhood finally snapped. A meeting was called that evening in what was left of the community hall. People filled every seat, some still wearing muddy clothes, others holding pictures of the damage to their homes. The air was thick with anger. I stood up when it was my turn to speak. "I told you this would happen," I said, my voice calm but firm. Not just once, not twice, repeatedly. And every time, I was dismissed. We all were. "You said we should be grateful. Do you feel grateful now?" Some people nodded. Others murmured. The HOA board members avoided eye contact. A neighbor named Lisa spoke next. Her basement had flooded completely. "My kids' rooms are destroyed. Their things are gone. And all of this could have been prevented. We trusted you, and you treated us like we were the problem." This time, the room erupted with voices, shouting, accusing, demanding accountability. The HOA president finally tried to speak, raising his hands as if calming children. "We understand your frustration." But the room was done being calm. This wasn't frustration. This was betrayal. And that was the moment everyone agreed. We were going to fight back. The decision to fight wasn't just emotional. It was necessary. The damage to our homes, our health, and our community wasn't something we could simply wipe away and forget. The HOA had acted with negligence, ignored clear warnings, and put every family in the neighborhood at risk. This wasn't just a mistake. It was reckless. The morning after the community meeting, several of us gathered at my house. We formed a group, small at first, just 7 neighbors, but determined. We contacted environmental engineers, safety inspectors, and even a city attorney who specialized in residential zoning law. We compiled photographs, written complaints dating back months, video evidence, and statements from residents. The more we gathered, the stronger our case became. The turning point came when the environmental inspector delivered his report. The water tank had not only been constructed with undersized pressure valves, but the foundation was unstable. The HOA had ignored multiple warnings from the contracting engineers during the build. In other words, the explosion wasn't an unexpected accident. It was practically guaranteed to happen. With this evidence, we filed a formal liability claim against the HOA. And once the news spread, other affected neighborhoods came forward with similar stories of intimidation, oversights, and carelessness. The HOA had been cutting corners for years, using community dues while refusing to listen to the very people they were supposed to represent. The legal process was long and exhausting, but we stayed united. For once, the neighborhood wasn't silent, not afraid, not passive. We were loud. We were organized. We were done being ignored. Months later, the verdict came. The HOA was found guilty of negligence, property damage, and violation of residential zoning requirements. They were ordered to pay full compensation for repairs, medical treatments, property loss, and emotional distress. But the biggest victory wasn't the money. The HOA board was dissolved, every member removed, every policy overhauled, and the water plant? It was dismantled piece by piece. The tank was taken down. The land was restored. For the first time in a long while, I stepped into my backyard and felt peace again. The sky was open. The air was clean. And the neighborhood was slowly returning to itself. But something had changed in all of us. We had learned that silence is compliance, that being polite is not the same as being safe, and that a community is strongest not when it is quiet, but when it stands together. And I realized something else. I hadn't just fought for my house. I had fought for my home. The difference is everything.